don't just be different, be unique. The best brands in the world are not just different, they're unique. Companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, the Amazon, these are companies, they cannot be imitated because they are truly unique. And how do you make your customer the hero in their own story? So, Andrew, when you buy something, you want to be the hero of your own story. You want to be the protagonist. You get to win in the end. You stand on top of the hill, you get the guy, you get the girl, you plant the flag, you get the trophy, you get the awards, right? How does your brand help people get there? Oh, I like to tell people that I'm in the business of creating the condition that I call irrational loyalty. And irrational loyalty is when you are so indelibly bonded to a brand that you'd feel like you were cheating on it if you were to choose an alternative.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success, it's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Deb Gabler, the founder of Sol Marketing and the branding powerhouse behind some of the most iconic strategies in the game. She's not just a branding expert, she's a brand evangelist who's written 3 best-selling books on the topic, including Branding is Sex and Irrational Loyalty. Deb's frameworks, the Branding Values Pyramid, Ideal Customer Archetype, and Brand Swagger Questions are used by companies all over the world to get crystal clear on who they are and how they show up. If you've ever wondered how to make your brand magnetic, memorable, and built to last, this is the conversation you don't want to miss. Let's get into it. So, Deb, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Andrew. It is my pleasure.
Awesome. So, let's start off with this because, I know you, I know your background, but can you help the listeners to understand what your background is? What is your ninja skill? What is that one thing that you do really well?
Oh, I like to tell people that I'm in the business of creating the condition that I call irrational loyalty. And irrational loyalty is when you are so indelibly bonded to a brand that you'd feel like you were cheating on it if you were to choose an alternative. And so here's a really good example of that. You and I were talking before we started recording here about Apple and Microsoft and our systems going down and all of that. So I'm so irrationally loyal to iThingies, that literally, if you were to look at my desk, look in my house, I have practically every iThingy that has ever been made, right? And irrational loyalty is where Apple's money is made, right? People bond emotionally with this brand. They bond emotionally with these products, even though they know, and I know, that there are other products out there that are of a competitive nature, that the functional benefits and the operations and the features are superior to Apple. So, quick story about that just to illustrate what irrational loyalty is. I don't know if you remember, probably goes back about 10 years ago, where Apple and Samsung sued each other because their
Yes.
products were so virtually indistinguishable from one another. So I
Yeah.
was like, all right, I'm an Apple enthusiast and I probably spend on average 500 to $1,000 more than my friends and colleagues who are buying the other competing products. I might as well go check this out. So I went down to my local Best Buy store where I talked to an adorable, well-educated sales associate who showed me the Samsung Galaxy S, whatever it was, right? And I held this beautiful, lickable technology in my hand. Bling! It was like fantastic, right?
Mhm.
And I learned a couple of important things: faster memory, more onboard storage, big open, wide open Android ecosystem, more durable glass, which is an issue for a klutz like me, right? It cost on average $500 less, depending on which version you were buying, right? Sounds like a win. Yet
Yeah.
when I held that thing in my hand, I felt like I was cheating on Apple. And that's where all their margin is, right? And so I'm in the business of creating those conditions, those deep emotional bonds that make people buy things not with their minds and not with their wallets, but with their hearts.
Mhm.
So that's
So
my ninja skill.
I love that. And you're right. There's actually an entire, newsletter called The Cult of Mac. And it's a thing. I'm one of those too. I have Apple everything. And they just work together. They have a well-designed product. It just works together. Things just kind of happen.
Well, and people
They're
don't
friendly,
buy
but
it
there's
just for
yeah.
that. People buy
Yeah.
it because it makes them look cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit down on an airplane in a first class seat and whip open a ginormous Hewlett Packard laptop,
Yeah.
right? does not
It's
compute. And
yeah,
so brands become part of the people who use them.
yes.
We do research, to really understand that core identity structure and how do brands sort of permeate those relationships with human beings. And we learned a couple things. Number one, brands that engender that quality of irrational loyalty, they truly become part of your identity. So if you're using an iPhone, you're using a Mac, you're wearing your AirPods, whatever it happens to be, it's actually part of who you are. And the other thing, it's become indispensable to you in some way, meaning it's irreplaceable in your life. So, yeah, you asked me like, what is my ninja skill? It's helping brands, all kinds of organizations at all stages of life, in all scopes, different geographies, different parts of the world, B2B, B2C. I help them sort of hack Maslow's hierarchy of needs to create those indelible bonds of irrational loyalty.
Because I know that, and I don't. Many people would not admit to this, but when you get a text message and you see the green bubbles, not the blue
Oh my
bubbles.
God, it
Yep.
like makes my eyes roll back in my head. There's nothing worse than a group text with one Android user in it. And then, oh, by the way, you can't exit that text thread. I don't know if a couple of months ago you saw that the Android people were suing Apple for the green text bubbles showing up on the iPhones because they felt like they were being unfairly judged.
Yeah.
Andrew, there is nothing rational about this. The fact that we are even talking about this, and by the way, I talk about this like every freaking day, those green text bubbles, like there is nothing rational about that. And
Uh,
yet I will go back and I will buy this product over and over and over again, even though I know that it is functionally limited.
yeah, and it's one of those things where anyone who's an iPhone user knows exactly what we're talking about, and
Mhm.
they have thought that, oh, damn, another green bubble. So I want to talk a little bit about that though, because again, you said it's irrational. I mean, we know people buy with their emotions; they don't buy with logic. They back it up
Yep.
with logic. But you've got a secret skill. So I'm rereading the book, the Start with Why by Simon Sinek, and he goes into some of this stuff too. But I'd like
Yep.
you to go into a little bit about what's that psychology. We're talking about Maslow's hierarchy. We've been talking about a couple of different things. What's that look like? Like, why do we do that beyond just
Yeah,
being
yeah.
emotionally
You know
attached?
what? I'm so grateful to Simon Sinek for that book, Start with Why. Actually, like it goes all the way back to the original TEDx talk, the Golden Circle
Gosh,
talk from, I don't know, it's probably more than 10 years
yeah.
now that that's been out there. But like I'm so grateful to him for like simplifying this conversation about like what is kind of the brain science behind that. And
Mhm.
what Sinek says is that people in organizations that communicate from a place of purpose and passion, they build much more highly extensible entities. They become more extensible as brands. They bond more strongly with humans. They have more permission to do more things because they communicate from a place of why. And one of the things that Simon Sinek talks about is the different parts of the brain that get activated when, they hear and take in stories, right? And he talks about three key parts of the brain, namely like the brain stem back here in the amygdala, sort of the reptile brain. That's the part of the brain that controls the fight or flight mechanism. It's the part of the brain that has those sort of neurophysiological responses to fear, which is to produce cortisol, to make your hair stand up on end, to make you bigger, makes animals like look bigger because they're fending off prey, right? He also talks about the frontal cortex, which is the thinking, rational part of the brain, processes language, it does math, it tells you black from white, it tells you yes or no, right? But really, what he's concerned with and what branding is concerned with is the deep, gooey core of the brain, which gives people the feels, right? And the why aspect of this, and branding is all about the why, right? Otherwise, stuff like, a $2,000 Gucci handbag wouldn't exist. The gooey core of the brain, the limbic system of the brain, is the part of the brain that really processes the relationship of brand. And that also extends into another sort of psychological construct that a lot of us are familiar with, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mentioned that before. Maslow's hierarchy basically says it's based on this construct of a pyramid, which suggests that you have to satisfy things on the bottom to build the base, create a foundation before you can add another layer, add another layer, add another layer. Maslow suggests that everybody is on this path to what we refer to as self-actualization. And self-actualization is when you're vibrating operating on your highest plane. You are at your highest performing, fulfilling your highest human potential best, right? You are your best Andrew. And what you eat, what you drink, what you wear, what you buy is all part of your road to get there, right? At the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy are, these basic physiological and safety needs: going to sleep at night, not being afraid you're going to get eaten by a bear in your sleep, right? Food, water, shelter, air, procreation, the basics of life. If you haven't satisfied those, you can't get to the next levels, which were about belongingness and esteem needs, right? Being part of a group, birds of a feather. I'm a Jeep driver. I see other Jeep drivers. We do the Jeep wave, right? And then you
Yep.
get up to the highest level of the pyramid, which is this Jeep has become part of who I am. And it signals not just to other people, but to myself what my identity is. And so, when you combine this desire to like fulfill your highest human potential through what you buy, what you use, the brands you use, with this idea that these branding relationships basically simulate really quick stories that permeate the feeling part of your brain, you understand a little bit of the psychology and brain science behind branding. Branding goes straight to that limbic system because people need to feel something to do something, right?
Mhm.
You know,
Talking about, strong brands and building an identity around a brand, Jeep is the absolute perfect example of that. Because, for those that don't know about the Jeep Wave, Jeep Wrangler owners wave at each other. It's a thing.
Absolutely.
And
The
it's
Jeep
a
Wave,
huge part of it. Like,
it's
yeah,
a thing,
yeah,
100%. Well, and if I told you that I drove here today in a Ford F-150 truck, you've got a story about me immediately,
yeah,
right? You're
yeah,
like, she's from Texas. She's really reliable. She's got a dog. She likes to help her friends move. She's a
yeah,
little rugged. She likes to get outside, but she's value minded. Well, that's not
exactly.
what I drive,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But you have a story about me. And so brands, they become part of your story, right? And this is why, like, when you look back, especially in recent history, like over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, like brands have become really, really divisive, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Your choice to use a brand says something about you, and then you are judged in a particular way for your choice to use that brand,
You're
right?
a blue bubble or a green bubble person.
100%, 100%. I wrote about that extensively in my book Branding is Sex, and it's funny because when I go and I speak or I do some consulting, I show up at a place, people are like, "Okay, all right, I'm an Android user. I hope you're not offended." I'm like, "No, I'm not offended. I just don't want to text with you," right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So now, one of the things I love to get into, because this is amazing information, and let's do this. One thing I want to do. So that's one of the things that I think we're talking about here is, instead of selling your product, like it does this, and this, you're selling that identity behind it. What's one small change somebody can make as a small business owner to flip that script from going, I'm selling this and here's all the benefits, to I want a cult-like following from my brand. What's one
Yeah.
quick
I
thing
mean,
they
if
can do to
you'd want
change?
to attract legions of irrationally loyal fans, you asked for one thing. I'm going to give you four things, four
Sure.
simple things right here.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what the most important one of those things to do. So the best brands in the world, they do four things.
Mhm.
And this, like, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, you're just getting started, you have a side gig, maybe you're selling art or music or something like that. Just do these four things. Number one, aim your brand at a singular, ideal, archetypal customer. What
Okay.
do I mean? I mean, the amalgamation of all of the best characteristics of the best customer, the one who is most highly predictive of your success as a brand. Figure out who that person is. Know them lock, stock, and barrel. I make my clients draw a picture of it. Draw a picture of it. Get a big piece of paper, or get a big piece of butcher paper, trace a human being on it, and I want you to draw it. If that person is a good listener, draw them with big ears. If that person has a big heart, draw them with a big red heart. If they are the person in the business that you're talking to who controls the budget, give them a big bag of money, but also put psychographic, attitudinal, and behavioral characteristics in there. Are they mid career? They're still in growth mode and accumulation mode in their career. They have a lot of family responsibilities outside of work. They have a lot at stake to get things right. They feel really, really, really pressured. Can you see how understanding all of those attributes of the customer that you are most made for can help you aim your brand directly about them? And then everything else as a brand becomes about elevating that person up their Maslow's hierarchy. So that's number one. Aim your brand at a singular, ideal, archetypal customer. For Nike, you've bought Nike products, right?
Yeah,
Nike's
absolutely.
ideal customer is actually a 19-year-old man, like an elite runner. Did you know that? I own
No, I did
Nike
not know that.
products too. But the Nike brand is the Nike brand is the Nike brand is the Nike brand. Whether you buy it at the Nike store, you buy it at Nike.com, you buy it at Nordstrom, you're a high school athletic director, you're a recreational middle-aged runner from Austin, Texas, you are
Right.
a recreational golfer, or you're the PGA, right? The
Yeah.
Nike brand is the same because they aim their brand at the ideal customer who is the inner elite athlete inside of all of us.
Interesting. Or the soon-to-be burgeoning sneakerhead whose friends talked you into paying way more than you wish to admit to for a pair of sneakers.
But that's the inner elite athlete inside of all of us, right? Nike gets all of us, right? Like we'll buy it, but they aim their brand squarely on that person. The Just Do It campaign is all about stimulating an internal dialogue with that person, right? We can all relate
Yeah.
to that. So that's number one. Number two, become part of that person's self-image.
Hmm.
So the best brands in the world, they aim their brand at that one person, they become part of that person's self-image. The hack for that is to answer this question. What does it say about them, that ideal customer that we just pictured? What does it say about them that they use your brand? What does it say about them? They consume your music, they watch your films, they read your books, they hire you for event planning. What does it say about them? That is one of the biggest tweaks that people can make to their brand that will make you stand out from everyone else. While everyone else is talking about we do, we do, we do, we are, we are, we are, we have, we have, we have, you can talk about you will, you can, and here's how you empower them, right? Number three, don't just be different, be unique. The best brands in the world are not just different, they're unique. Every business planning and business strategy methodology that you read, every business book that you read, I went to business school, they talk about you have to differentiate, you have to differentiate. I am here to tell you it is not enough to be different. You have to be unique. The most valuable global brands, most the brands where the brand itself contributes the most to the valuation of the company, companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, the Amazon, these are companies they cannot be imitated because they are truly unique. There are others who can try to deliver on some of the features and functionality, but the best brands in the world are truly unique. How do you hack that one? Answer this question. What is the one thing that people get from me they don't get from anyone else? So I think you know this. I have aside from, speaking, writing, doing media, I also I have a marketing agency, right? You can't swing a cat over your head and not hit 150 other people who do exactly what I do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the one thing people get from me and my team is they get what I refer to as the proverbial kick in the ass, right? Because my ideal customer is the marketing leader of a fast growing enterprise B2B technology or professional services company that has a very short runway to get it right, a lot at stake, doesn't have time for screwing around, doesn't want to tell a marketing agency what to do, and they have a goal of propelling their company from being a dark horse brand to be a top 5 most valuable global brand. It would be very different if I said I wanted to be Utah's favorite marketing agency. I would show up in a completely different way. So the one thing that people get from me, they get all those marketing services, just like everybody gets all those other services, right? We talked about iPhone versus Samsung, you get all that kind of stuff, but the one thing that you get from us is you get the proverbial kick in the ass. And then the final thing, the fourth thing is make your brand about your customer and not about you. And so I'm hoping everybody who is listening to this that as you go about your daily business and you consume marketing messages, which they are all around us all the time, you will become acutely aware of the brands that are about you versus the brands that are about them. What do I mean? Just answer this question. How do you make your customer the hero in their own story? So, Andrew, when you buy something, you want to be the hero of your own story. You want to be the protagonist. You get to win in the end. You stand on top of the hill. You get the guy, you get the girl, you plant the flag, you get the trophy, you get the awards, right? How does your brand help people get there? And make your foundational story, your narrative about that. So, those four things. Aim your brand at a singular, ideal, archetypal customer. It's a unicorn, right? Because it contains all of the best features of the best customers that you are most made for. And that's aspirational in many cases, right? Because your brand is designed to elevate people into that person. Number two, answer the question of what does it say about them that they use your brand, become part of their identity. Number three, don't just be different, be unique. What's the one thing that people get from you they don't get from anyone else? And then finally, make your brand about them. I want everyone who's listening to this after this podcast, go open up your company website and look and see if the first word on the company website is either the word we, oh, hi Zoom, either the word we or your company name. You're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Think in terms of how your brand elevates your customer up their own Maslow's hierarchy.
Interesting. And I think that's something that I've seen it with other companies where it always starts with the company name. We do this. We
Yeah.
do this. And it doesn't, I like the fact that
And
it
it's like,
sort of
so
leave it open.
what? So
Yeah.
what? That's like, you don't buy ice cream because it says on the label it's cold and it's sweet. Like,
Yeah.
those are the baseline requirements for ice cream,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You say, what is it going to do for you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's going to make you
I
feel
mean,
good.
it's going
Make
to
you look good.
introduce you to a spouse. It's going to help you grow hair. It's going to make you feel sexy. It's an indulgence that elevates your day or it helps you escape from badness. Whatever it is, really, really focus on like that end benefit and the differentiation piece, that uniqueness. It comes from offering something that no one else does. And
Mhm.
here's a hint, here's the hack for that. It is never a feature. The one thing they get from you that they don't get from anyone else is never a feature. It is a superpower. What is the superpower that they get from you that they don't get from anyone else? I give them the kick in the ass, the kick in the pants that they always needed to be successful in their career. The average CMO at a technology company right now, their tenure is about 18 months, right?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
need to like be brief, be brilliant, be done, and then help them accelerate to their next big job.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is a question I always love to ask people because everyone has these fascinating jobs. Yours is absolutely fascinating about how you get into somebody's head and teach them how to become good marketing, be good at marketing.
Yep.
What was the sequence of events that caused you to get to this point? Like what made you so passionate about building brands?
So this is one of my favorite questions because I grew up in a nearly brandless existence.
Okay.
So I had these weird Eastern European parents, very practical, like descendant of Holocaust and Hungarian Revolution survivors, didn't have a whole lot, were refugees for a big time in their lives, right? Came to the United States basically with nothing, self-made people. They were very, very, very frugal, practical, down to earth. Like I was a member of that family. We never went out to dinner. Like maybe once a month we would eat at a restaurant, and that was because it was a special occasion, a birthday or a holiday or something like that. All of the other kids at school were wearing brand name clothing. My parents were shopping at Kmart or whatever, not because we were poor, but just because like brand never played a role in our lives. Well, of course, like you go and you're surrounded by your peers and you see them having things that you don't have, and you know desiring to be like birds of a feather with them. I'm like, oh, I want that, I want that. And here's a good story that illustrates how I grew up. When I was, oh gosh, probably, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old, there was a very, very popular toy. It was a Barbie toy, and it was Barbie's head, and she was on a pedestal, and she came with like makeup and curlers and things like that, where you could do her up like it was like a beauty shop and whatever. And that was the prize toy. I think it was probably around the same year as the Easy Bake Oven. I'm really dating myself here. Um, but it was like something I really, really wanted. And I asked for that as a gift for a birthday or something. And I didn't receive it. What I received, her name was Bobby, and she was a head with dark hair like mine with a suction cup on the bottom so you could like put her on the table there, right? So that's how I
Yeah.
grew up. A McDonald's hamburger had never crossed my lips until I was 16 years old and had a driver's license and could drive myself, right?
Okay.
And so I come from this brandless existence. The minute I get exposed to brands
Hmm.
and start to like really be able to understand the mystique from being an outsider, I was fascinated by the psychology and the behavioral aspects behind branding. So I went to school. I went away to school and I studied I went to business school and I studied business and communications and things like that. And then I had my very first job out of school was I was a reporter. And I ran the assignment desk at a TV station. I did some remote reporting and I was telling stories, right? And so you have like this combination, this brandless existence, this job being a journalist and a storyteller, and then eventually like I needed a corporate job because I don't know if you know this, unless of course you're Lester Holt and you're on the NBC News every night, like there is no money to be made in that. And I needed to support myself. So I was like, how do I get myself into a corporate role where I can do something similar? That was marketing, right? And so ended up in marketing roles in the most high tech of all high tech organizations, which at the time was Bell Labs, where
Oh
there were
yeah.
literal scientists like walking the halls. They called me college girl. I was like the one marketing person in the entire building. I was like recent college graduate. I was going to business school at night, all this kind of stuff and whatever, bringing like my newfangled thoughts about, hey, when we're marketing transmission equipment or microelectronics to these big telephone carriers, or we're inventing new fiber optic things, we need to not talk about like the glass tube inside or speeds and feeds and bits and bytes and how many hops to a tier one network. We need to be talking to them about how this benefits them and how this transforms their businesses and their lives and whatever. And so that's kind of how I came to this. How I came to irrational loyalty is like fast forward, like I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I know it's hard to believe, right? But fast forward to when I stood up my own little practice 22 years ago. I needed a way to like really simplify what it was I was doing to permeate all the noise out there about what marketing is, what marketing isn't, what sales is, what sales isn't, what is the intersection of those things, what brand is, what brand isn't. And over the years sort of like honed this very, very simplistic but not simple, so simplistic way to like permeate business leaders' minds with this idea of irrational loyalty, to create something that was craveable, something they could really get their heads around, and then explain it in a relatable way. Not really like my audience are not marketing people, my audience are business people, business leaders, right? And helping them understand the importance of hacking into these deep emotional connections. So that's my story, like from brandless existence to brand obsessed.
And I think that the story about the Bell Labs, and for those that don't know maybe who Bell Labs is, not, for the four people out there that don't, this is the place that like designed the transistor and lasers and
Yeah.
come up with a
No,
lot of
it's
them we
like
use today.
when I explain to people that, like, yeah, my first like real corporate job, I worked at Bell Labs, and like I worked alongside Nobel Prize winning scientists at Bell Labs, right? I was like the lone marketing chick, right? Alongside all these people walking around in lab coats and secret layers and labs and all that kind of stuff. Like this is there's nothing more high tech than that. And talking about speeds and feeds and bits and bytes and how many hops to a tier one network and all that kind of stuff. Like that
Yeah.
that entire business was built on that.
Yeah, and I think coming from a line, my grandfather was an engineer, my dad was an engineer, I have an engineering degree, so I can say stuff like
Yeah.
this. Where heard a joke at one point that said, "Have you ever met somebody who was truly brilliant but couldn't communicate to save their lives?" And the other person says, "Have you met an engineer?"
Yeah.
And I
My
think it's
father, my
completely,
brother, engineers, right? And
yeah,
it's really funny because they
yeah,
have,
yeah,
they're super analytical. They're
yeah.
very ones and zeros. Things are very, very binary. Well, the interesting
Mm.
thing about what I do, you know, there's a huge analytical piece to what I do. Everything I do is data informed. What are these gestures?
Well, that was different.
I've never seen that before, but what the heck? Okay, well, anyway, surprise. But yeah, everything I do is data informed. We conduct real quantitative and qualitative scientific research to understand not just the what and how many, but the why. So like these theories that I talk about and the brain science and the emotional connections and things like that. Like one of the things we do is we make those things measurable because as you know, probably as an engineering type and also as a business type, you understand that people make decisions with their heart and then they check off a box with their mind, right? And it's very important that I'm not like reaching into a black box and saying like this is what you need to say about your brand and how you need to say it. Like that we actually use the data to inform. So one of the great things about how I do the work that I do is that I'm partnered up with a PhD level experimental social scientist. Like our research director has a PhD in experimental social science. So you can imagine the kinds of research projects that we do, but we partner together not just to quantify these brand relationships, but understand at scale, like what forms these relationships and what are all of the specific levers that brands need to pull in order to like go up that ladder of Maslow's hierarchy or the irrational loyalty loop, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that we think about with marketing and maybe the data behind it. And I think that's something that's really important is being able to quantify what we're doing. You know,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Again, it goes back to the Kevin O'Leary saying that if you don't know your numbers, you're dead to me. It's kind of a thing. Let's have something behind it to do it. And it's interesting that you're actually taking scientists who study emotion and then
Mhm.
using that to go. And it's interesting. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
everything we do is like from a social science
Yeah.
perspective, right? The field of behavioral economics and just consumer behavior as a broader category, like all of that, like why people buy, how they move. Like you look at the economy today, I would, like just listening to the news this morning and shifts in the stock market,
Mhm.
those things are caused by emotional reactions to things that are happening outside of ourselves, right? It's all behavioral economics. Behavioral economics for brand is just on sort of a micro scale.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, while we're winding up here, I do have one question that I always ask, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a significant impact on your life that you want to share with the audience?
Okay. Yeah. Well, this podcast, of course, has had a
Well,
significant
thank you.
impact on
Appreciate
my life.
that.
Yeah. So, you prepped me a little bit for this, so I had to think about some books. So, and one of the things I explained to you is that like I write books and I write books for myself and I also do some ghostwriting for other leaders and stuff like that. And so like right now I was struggling. I'm not reading anything because I don't want the voice, point of view, writing style of a book that I'm reading or listening to like permeate my brain and sort of like mess up what I'm doing when I'm trying to step into somebody else's brain and body and write as them, right? So I'm not reading anything right now, but I have a great book recommendation that has had a huge impact on me. And it's this book called Get to Aha. And it's written by Andy Cunningham. And Andy Cunningham, she's a fantastic marketing communications leader. She's very well known in our industry for having helped Steve Jobs launch the Macintosh. So she goes all the way back to that big 1984 Super Bowl ad that people are
Yep.
still talking about here. She was not only my boss, but like a huge mentor and inspiration to me and my life. And one of the things about this book is it's really about strategic positioning, sort of defining the core DNA of your brand. And she talks about three important topics where basically brands are primarily one of these three things, and they are mothers, missionaries, or mechanics. And every brand has to occupy the conceptual space of one of these things almost to the exclusion of everything else. So, a mother brand is about its customers and it's about the customer set that you're in. I think of brands like American Express, where there's privilege and membership. That's a mother brand because American Express is the mother and it's sort of like gathering all the children together and we're all part of the group, right?
Yeah.
Then you have mechanics, which mechanic brands are really about product and operational excellence, right? I think of brands like Intel. Intel would be a mechanic brand. They are all about the product, right? We're about chips, we're about defining, what is the bar by which chip performance should be measured, and that's 100% that we're all about, right? So those are mechanics. And then the third category, missionaries. Missionary brands are on a mission to transform the world. And transforming the world, it could be the world at large, or it could be like your own individual world. And I think of, to some extent, forget, like Apple is a missionary brand. If you go all the way back to Apple's brand manifesto about like we're for the crazy ones, we're for the square pegs and the round holes and all of that, like they're on a mission to transform the world of those individual people. And as a result, they've completely changed like our relationship with technology on this earth. So it's called Get to Aha. The author is Andy Cunningham, great friend, somebody I just really, really admire. I had the privilege of working with her. She was the CEO of the last company I worked for before I started my own. We are still friends. One of the great things about this book for people who are actually building businesses. Of course, I want people to read Branding is Six because that is the how-to book on branding. But for strategic positioning, there's like a quiz in the book. Like me, she gives the methodology away for the price of a book, but you can go through and like kind of go through the checklist and figure out, am I mother, missionary, or mechanic? And am I showing up as a brand with my actions in a way that really solidifies that? And so what I really like about that book is, not only is it like super practical and you can apply the techniques and theories like directly to your work today, but it's really all about this one thing about branding and positioning, which is it's about clarity. It's about being clear, being consistent, and making your relationship with the outside world about your customers instead of about you.
Awesome.
Probably more than
Well,
you asked for, right?
that's perfect, actually, and it's nice to I like to I have one of those. First of all, I really like the fact that you quoted that Steve Jobs speech because I do all the time. I butcher it, but I do. We're the ones that are crazy enough to change the
Yeah.
world. Yeah, it's one of my favorite speeches of all time. But I love to hear about kind of some of, especially since you have a personal connection to that book. I like to hear about how it's affected your life, and a lot of times people will come in and say, "Hey, this book's really done something good," like Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of
Mhm.
people have read it. Not many people know Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter,
Yeah.
and that brings it to another kind of level, is having that personal connection to it. So awesome! Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Thank you so much for dropping so much wisdom with us today too. I really appreciate it. I think
Thank
it's a
you.
blind spot in a lot of people's marketing and a lot of people's branding is they don't think about the customer, and they really come at. I've done this too. Come at it from the wrong direction, and it's
Yeah.
nice to hear that. Nice to hear the other side of that. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you being on here today. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.